This fits in with your speech after the
Do I? Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
On behalf of Conservation Areas Wirral and of course Wirral Council, I'd just like to welcome you all for coming here today for the unveiling of this prestigious plaque, Mary Ann Mercer. What a woman. Not only was she the first mayor in Birkenhead, but she was a great champion for the working class and loads of other things. Suffragette, she was one of the first suffragettes, and she led a massive campaign for this locally. Before we start, I'd like to call on Terry. If you'd like to come here, Terry. Terry has written a poem about Mary Ann Mercer, and I've asked him if he would come and read this out to you.
Thank
Terry.
You. Yeah, thank you. Birkenhead's first female mayor. She lived in Norman Street. Mary Ann Mercer is her name, and here we'd love to meet. She was elected in 1919, a Labour councillor till 1945, a pioneer for women's rights, and many kids she's kept alive. She's buried in Plaque Cemetery, and she's mentioned on our tour. No doubt she was invited in by God when she knocked on heaven's door. So thank you, Mary Ann Mercer, Birkenhead's first female mayor. We have gathered here for the revealing of this plaque. It's a moment we want to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. That was great. That was really good. Right, I'd like now to call on Professor Robert Lee, who will give you a little bit more background to this wonderful lady. Robert.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to see you all coming to commemorate and celebrate Mrs. Mercer. I wonder how many of you actually knew very much about her. Well, I know Elizabeth knows everything about Birkenhead's local history, but I was astounded that some of the ward councillors, eminent though they may be, really knew nothing about this very magnificent lady. Because as Peter's indicated, the first woman lady mayor of Birkenhead. And why do we need to celebrate it? Because when did other cities and towns first have a female mayor? What about Wallasey, for example? Madam Mayor? No?
You were always putting people on the spot.
Of
I know.
And I'm told not to do that.
Yeah. 1946 to 7. Manchester, about the same time. Doncaster, and we don't want to denigrate Doncaster, 2013. Isn't that awful? Really dreadful. Well, not necessarily, but you know, that makes Mary Ann Mercer extra special. And she was the first socialist mayor of Birkenhead. And, you know, Steve, when did the Labour Party first come to power in Birkenhead? Come on, please.
1924, I believe.
No. John?
Birkenhead?
Yes.
I don't know.
Its Labour Prime Minister was 1920.
The important
1918.
knowledge that is somehow not retained.
right.
No, it was 1926. Yeah. Really important. So she was a socialist mayor even before the Labour Party was in control of the Birkenhead Corporation. And that's, again, a huge achievement. And she was herself, of course, working class. There were 3 other female mayors, or 4, it's difficult to be precise, in the country who held that sort of mayoral role, but they, by and large, were all upper middle class. Elizabeth Gareth Anderson, for example, was the first ever mayor in 1908. But these were people who were sort of well established. Mary Ann Mercer had a very difficult time. Her father died when she was only 3, and her mother then had to look after everyone. And that was difficult, very difficult in those years. So here's someone who rises through her own ability to become, the mayor of Birkenhead, and as a result, to dine with King George V when he came to Merseyside to open the Runcorn Bridge. What an achievement that is, And in a sense, she's a beacon for all of us, particularly young girls and young women from around this area in Clawton and Bidston and St James's, because she sets out how someone from a very difficult background can rise upwards and remain committed to her objectives. And when she accepted the mayoralty, what did she specify? She wanted to promote the trade and commerce of Birkenhead. She wanted to secure more investment in health, because that was something very sensible for Birkenhead to take forward. And she was committed to women's rights and health in particular, trying to improve the welfare of children and other members of the community. So she's really, I think, a wonderful woman. She was described as someone who was indefatigable, sincere and courteous, and very much like our Lady Mayor at the moment. So it is really a momentous occasion, and I think I want to thank all the people who have been involved in delivering this event. The Wirral Heritage Fund, Francesca and Will from Wirral Archives Service, the library service, in particular the Birkenhead Reference Library. And that makes you think how important all these structures are within the local authority, because by going into the past we can understand more of the present and we can plan for the future. We mustn't forget people like Mrs. Mercer. And then the conservation area Wirral, where would we be without them? Because they're sort of pioneering, putting out all these blue flags, which make people prouder of their communities, which again is so important. And Peter is essential. He's got, he built his own house. That's a fantastic achievement. And he's done all the sort of practical work that I could never, ever attack. And of course, the star, Mrs. Garrick, Elizabeth, she knew all about the story of the house that she lived in. Without her consent, of course, we wouldn't be here today for this momentous occasion. And finally, of course, Anne McLaughlin, who has, I've indicated, many similar virtues to Mary Ann Mercer. Without your fundamental support for this, we wouldn't be here either. And one final note, we have the grandson of the man who built your house, with us today, and I've actually printed out in the archives one of the planning application, and I'll give you that later on. So I'd like you all to thank all those people who have helped so much to commemorate and celebrate this amazing woman. So thank you.
Well now, there may be a test afterwards. Thank you, Robert. At least we all know a little bit more about why we're here today and why we're celebrating this wonderful lady. Right, I'd now like to call upon Councillor Anne McLaughlin, present Mayor of Wirral, but only for a short time. But apparently she'll be standing down in the very near future. Ladies and gentlemen,
I have stood down.
Councillor Anne McLaughlin.
Well, Peter and Robert, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody for being here today. It is wonderful. I have officially stood down. I am no longer a councillor for Bidston and St James's Ward, which I have the great privilege to represent for the past 14 years. Our new councillor, Councillor Liz Gray, representing the ward. She's here today, so it's lovely to see you, Liz. And I know she's going to be a fantastic councillor, as with Julie and Brian, and do a great job for this ward. But I've also had the great privilege this morning, just very briefly, to meet Mary Ann Mercer's great niece and nephew who are here, and her great great niece. So it's fantastic that through this occasion some of the family have been found and are with us today. And just before I go on to say other thank yous, I hope that as many of you as possible will join us at Birkenhead Park Rugby Club for sandwiches and coffee after this event. But I do want to start with thank yous, and my very first thank you is to Mrs. Garrett. Mrs. Garrett. Yeah. On behalf of the borough, we'd like to thank you very much indeed for allowing this blue plaque to go up over your home, which will be there for posterity. And we know that people will be stopping outside your gate to look at it. We'd like to say thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. And I know you've lived in this house for a very long time. Oh yes. And you knew all about Mary Ann Mercer and the fact that she'd lived here at 103 Norman Street. But this wouldn't have happened today without the help and support of a lot of people. In the deputy mayoral year, thinking about coming into the mayoralty, I started to think about first women who were first in the borough, first at becoming a councillor, first at becoming the mayor. And that's how I found Mary Ann Mercer. Professor Robert Lee suggested to me at an event that I may want to look at her, and with the help of the Wirral Archive Service, and I'm delighted Francesca's here today, I went along there and I spent a few hours with them, trawling over a lot of newspaper cuttings, a lot of archive footage, looking through burial records. With your help, the help of the Friends of Flaybrick at the cemetery, the help of Professor Lee, who researched more information, and of course the help of Conservation Areas Wirral. Now I have to tell you that very kindly in the leaflet you've got here, the Conservation Areas Wirral have said Councillor Anne McLaughlin suggested to them. Well, I badgered them. At every occasion and every event that I attended to unveil anything or to speak at anything, I lost no opportunity in reminding them that Mary Ann Mercer would be worthy of a blue plaque.
It started 12 months ago.
So I am very grateful to you all.
You're very welcome.
Yes. I'd like to say a thank you to Terry for reading the poem, a lovely poem to us today. Really lovely. I'm just absolutely delighted. Mary Ann Mercer was a pioneer for women, and in 2018, 100 years after some women got the vote, and don't forget, not all women had the vote then. It was women over 30. and it was married women over 30 who got the vote. But it paved the way. What people like Mary Ann Mercer done was pave the way as pioneers for other women to get involved in their communities and in politics. She really was a trailblazer for women. And I, as has been said by Robert, I hope that this plaque here, as it is on a main thoroughfare in the north end of Birkenhead, with lots of famously named streets around it, Brassey Street and Upper Brassey Street, and other pioneers of Birkenhead, that children, particularly young boys and girls, will stop here, will read this, and will aspire to be all that they can be, you know. And we've got a road in this ward named after Mary Ann Mercer, Mercer Road, as you know, just along Hoylake Road. And next to Mercer Road is Egan Road, the great Billy Egan, who was the first Labour MP for Birkenhead. And Billy Egan had a great phrase, which I'm going to finish with, that it's not where you start, it's not your humble beginnings, it's where you finish that's important. And, you know, this is a wonderful and fitting tribute to a wonderful woman who, and there's a lot more about her history to read. She was a great pioneer for pensions for women. She was a nurse by profession. Even becoming a nurse from the humble origins that she came from was, I think, a great tribute to her. I don't claim to have any of her virtues whatsoever. I think she was a real trailblazer in a way that many women today can really look up to. So I'm going to be absolutely delighted to unveil this blue plaque to Mary Ann Mercer.
Thank you. Don't pull it off the wall like that. Big pull.